Welcome back. Let's now move on to the concept of list.
And in the concept of list, we can store multiple variables within a single multiple values within a single variable. So previously, we said that variables are nothing more than boxes that store a certain value. You can think of list like a big box that is partitioned into many smaller boxes. Each smaller box stores a certain value. So in order to declare a list, for example, my list, we see that we will use the square brackets. So whenever the Python compiler sees the open square bracket and the closed square bracket, it knows that it is declaring a list. And what is contained within are the values that the list will hold. Each of the values will be separated by a comma. So here we see that my list contains 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 values. Let's take a look at how it is usually represented. So like I said earlier, it will actually look like something like this, where we see that the value 80, 75, 45, 25, and 34 are stored inside. So previously we said that, hey, a variable has a name. That's how you refer to the value stored inside. But for a list, what does that equate to? So in a list, we actually have this thing called an index. So the first value that is stored inside the list is always index 0, followed by index 1, index 2, index 3, and index 4. So if I go back to my code and let me just run this line. So I've already declared my list to contain the 5 values we saw earlier. Running type shows me that, hey, it's a list. And if I wanted to access the individual values, I need to know what is the index of the value. So for example, my list, square bracket 0. Can you guess what value will be printed out? Yes, it is 80 because that is the first value. So 1 will contain the value 75, 2 will contain the value 45. So whenever you want to access the list, you similarly just type in the name of the variable or the name of that list and just decide which variable you want to print out. You can also print out the entire list and that gives you all the values stored inside. Here, in the next line, we are going to introduce a new concept, and this concept is called method. So whenever we see this mylist dot and a keyword, it is actually a method, or rather, it's just a function that has been pre-coded for you, meaning that the people who created the variable type list have conveniently allowed you to actually append. When we talk about append, we are adding something at the end of the list. So my list is actually nothing more than the variable name. After the dot, we are just looking for a keyword. And when we say append, that allows us to add another value at the end of the list. So what we are doing here is we are adding the value 86 after 34. So printing out, we see that now 86 is a new value that is inside the list. What if we don't want to add right at the end, we want to add somewhere else? We can determine the index. So here, we are telling the compiler at position 2, include the value 85. At position 2, include the value 85. So earlier we said 80 is position 0, 75 is position 1. After 75, put in the value 85 and then the rest will follow. So after I insert and I print again, we see that the value 85 is now at position or index 2, and the rest follow along. So that is what we call, that is actually a list that contains integers as values. Next, we will also look at how it can also contain strings. So here, this list, my list B, contains 3 values inside: the value A, the value B, and the value D. Printing it out will print out ABD. So let me just introduce a quick function which is called length. If we want to know how many values are stored inside that list, we can use this keyword len, and because there are 3 values here, we see the value 3 being printed out. So now we see that, hey, something's missing. We actually need to include a C. And what position or where should we include the C? So A is always position 0, B is position 1. So if we want to include a C, that's where we put it into position 2. So dot insert position 2 and the value we want to insert, which is C. And here we see that we got ABCD. So if we are not happy about certain values inside that list, we make a mistake with the list, we want to delete one of the values, all we have to do is to include the keyword del and name of the variable along with the position. So delete the value at position 0, that is A, and now you see that A has disappeared. So previously we saw that if we wanted to access a single value, we can use the square bracket and include the index. In this case, if we wanted to access more than one value, then we can use this colon. So if we have the square bracket and inside there's a colon, it just tells them, hey, print everything. So everything is B, C, and D. If we want to put or specify a particular index to print from, so we can say that, hey, print everything from position 1 onwards. So B is position 0, C is position 1. And when we print from position 1 onwards, it will print C and the rest, which is also D.
Aside from specifying where to start, we can also specify where to stop. So by inserting a value after the colon, it tells the compiler we want to stop at the position 2 minus 1. So whatever value you put here, just minus 1, and that will be the last index that will be printed. So in this case, 2 minus 1 is 1. So the last index is position 1. Therefore, position 0, which is B, and position 1, which is C, will be printed out. D, which is position 2, will not be printed out. So lastly, as we have seen previously, by putting into square bracket the index or the name of the list followed by square bracket and the index, we can print a specific value within. It is also possible to insert a negative number, and what a negative number does for us is it goes back one value. So if we don't insert any value here, it's always 0. So minus 1 is the last value inside that list, and the last value inside that my list B is actually D. So print from starting from the last value to the end. So to the end only has D, therefore only D is printed. Minus 2 will go back 2 values. So in this case, there are only 3 items inside my list B, 0, 1, and 2. So by going back 2 steps, it goes to D, then C. So minus 2 to the end is printing from position 1 to the end. So we can either insert 1 or minus 2. Both give us the same outcome. So that brings us to the end of the first part on lists. Proceed to the next video where we will find out more about functions that are available when you use lists. Thank you.